feeling. It's alright, this happened once before. I'm fine.
Welcome to a special New Year's Eve episode of This Happened Once Before podcast, a conversation between generational Phish fans. I'm your host, Bill, and this week I'm joined by Derek, a veteran of the scene. We talk about his musical journey to Phish, some of the highlights of his year seeing the band, and then we dive deep into the archives for a New Year's Eve show for the ages. Derek brings decades of knowledge and his New England credentials as we talk about December 31st, 1993, from the Worcester Centrum, Worcester, Massachusetts. I will share my thoughts on Derek's show suggestion before next week's episode. In last week's episode, Powell suggested I listen to the show from August 2nd, 2022, from Blossom Music Center in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Ironically, I should have attended this one had it not been for a surprise visit from the COVID fairy. And man, did I miss out. As Powell mentioned, the show begins with a unique Strawberry Fields Forever opener, followed by first set standout versions of 46 Days, You Enjoy Myself, and Reba. To the momentous free second set opener, it's clear why this is considered a top contender for show of the summer. Finishing with excellent runs through Sense and Subtle Sounds, Split Open and Melt, and a bathtub gin encore, this show is a must listen no matter how long you have been a fan. Awesome recommendation, pal. Enjoy this week's special extended episode as we take a look at Phish's three-set masterpiece from December 31st, 1993 at the Worcester Centrum in Worcester, Massachusetts on This Happened Once Before podcast.
It's alright, this happened once before. I'm fine.
Welcome to another episode of This Happened Once Before, a podcast between generational Phish fans where we discuss their journey to the band, their love of the music, and we break down a show from the era of the band from 1988 to 1996. Today, I'm lucky to have with me, we're going to jump into a show that is huge in the Phish annals, coming up on a big anniversary in a couple of weeks, but this person I connected with was from the lovely state or was living in the lovely state that this show happened in. I knew it was meant to be. So who am I lucky to have with us today? The Commonwealth, pardon me, the Commonwealth. Who am I lucky to have with us today?
My name is Derek Hill, and I live in Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes, thank you for reminding me about that. Kentucky, thank you. So how many years have you been into the band?
Say that one more time.
How many years have you been into the band?
Oh, sorry. I
was
hearing things right off the bat here. I started listening to Phish in my late teens, which was 1998, 99, right around there. I started listening to Phish deliberately. So that's, I don't know, about 25 years.
Was that when you saw your first show too?
No, it wasn't. I saw my first show in 2003, so 20 years. I had I had about 4 or 5 years of listening before I was able to get out and see them, which also in that time period included the hiatus.
Right. So yeah,
during hiatus, actually, my buddies and I were lucky enough to see. I saw Trey band twice during hiatus. The shows were not back to back. In fact, one of them was in the summer of 2002, I believe, and one of them was in the fall or winter, some cold time. I don't remember exactly. And both of them had separate. The one I saw one at Mansfield in 2002, and Mike Gordon came out to play the encore, which was Mike's in Weekapaug, and that gave us hope. That was also really fucking nasty. Oh, I didn't even ask if I could swear on this. That encore, if you ever, I'll anyway. In the other show was a Trey band show up at the Flynn Theater, I believe, in Burlington, Vermont, later in the year, where Paige McConnell came out to play, and they played First Tube.
So you got little tastes of the band without actually seeing the band. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. Those were our hope shows. Those were
it's a little taste, right? A little wet the beak.
yeah, this hiatus has to end at some point. We're like itching for it, you know.
So how
So
many shows have you seen since 2003?
since 2003, I've seen 72 shows.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, my most recent show was 7/30/23 this past July. I was gifted a couple of tickets to the third night of the MSG run. They did like that 7 or 8
Very
shows up at so a buddy of mine screwed down Route 91 to
cool.
New York City and saw the show, and we're back by 8 a.m. the next morning.
That's great. That's great. That's
Yeah.
the Garden was my home for, home show base for a long time. And there's
Hmm.
really nothing like seeing them at that
Yeah.
arena.
That was my second time seeing them there. That was it. I've only seen them
Yeah,
twice there. Um,
they've really owned it now, and the
yeah.
residencies and whatever they want. It's really, really something
Right.
special. So
Yeah.
how familiar are you with their era, like that I'm focusing on, like the 1988 to 1996?
So, earlier this year, uh, my buddy Seth and Seth is about 10 years older than me, and he started seeing this band in 95, I believe. Uh, Seth and I did a deep dive in just right from the beginning of what's available on re-listen. I
Mhm.
decided that I needed to hear the entire catalog as a whole to get closer to the band on an intimate level. I had to hear everything. So I mean, that was my mission when I set out that day, was to listen to every show Phish has ever played. I made it up to like somewhere in 1989 before I saw something shiny, and the mission's on pause right now.
The problem is that there's new shows to listen to all the time. That's the issue, right?
That's
Like
true. That's
it
true. So
never
I
the mail never stops, Sherry. It just keeps
No,
coming. That's
right. So I'm pretty familiar with the early 80s, the early stuff from the 80s. Um 90, 91, 92. I'm not super familiar with, which was fascinating because I heard um 12-year-old say the
no
same
read.
thing. Reed, thank you.
Read, yeah.
I just said it a few minutes ago. I couldn't get it out. He said the same thing, and I said, man, so 90, 91, 92, they need some more love from us. But I have listened to plenty of shows from that period, but my issue becomes when I say, all right, I hit random show on re-listen and it gives me something from 92, and I look at the set list and go, okay, chances are this sounds exactly like the last one that had this set list from 92, and I will listen to the horns anytime they come up because I have been a sucker for horns my whole life. um uh and that, so 93 I've listened to a lot of because the old school people told me to listen to 93 when I was, getting into this stuff. um 94, at one point in time, all I owned for music, I was traveling. I had one of those large 48 CD cases, books of
Yeah.
fall 94 on disc. Somebody
No.
had burnt the entire tour, put it on disc for us, and that's what we had. 95 has been my baby lately. I never gave it the attention that it deserved. Lately, I've been on a very deep dive of 95. I've been listening to the show of the day for this fall, for the 95 fall tour. I've been listening to the one that coincides with the current date each day from 95. And 96, I mean, I spent a lot of time over the years. Once I got YouTube, I remember when YouTube became like a big part of my life. Um, the 96 Europe shows were like there for some reason.
Yeah.
They were always there. I listened to a lot of those. So
That should be the
I
motto
would
for
say,
YouTube.
yeah, 90,
Not sure how it's
we
there,
have
but it's
fish.
there.
Yeah, I don't know where it came.
Yeah.
So I would say I would say 60%. I'd say I'm 50 to 60% confident in those, 88 to 96.
Oh, that's
I
great. Because
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying about those years. No, I have an episode coming out shortly about a show in '92 for other reasons than necessarily, to your point, like set list or version.
Right. Right.
But I think, this show we're going to jump into, like you said about 93 or any show in the 90s is, probably, I would say top 5. So I couldn't agree more, that part of their era, those years specifically, 94, 95, 96 are really where I was fortunate enough to be part of seeing them. That's the bulk of my shows came during that time period.
Right.
Really to this day, I probably listen to it still too much.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I think I branched out to probably like 98 as opposed to just 96. But so that's cool that you had a familiarity with this. So you've been around the scene for a while. What do you think the best part of the scene is right now?
Sorry about the dead air.
No, that's right.
Well, I mean, there's like an elephant in the room with that question, and it's not necessarily a negative. I think a lot of people use the elephant in the room as a negative thing at times. It's technology, man. When I think about, and I think about a lot, especially listening to these, your podcast and Brian's and Bobby and Oliver, and when I think back to when I was getting into Phish, I didn't have this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I had the internet, right? But the internet didn't have all these cool things that it has today, so that's, I mean, being able to grab my mobile device or a laptop and a set of headphones, and anywhere I go at any time of the day, anywhere in the world, basically, essentially, I can listen to any show that Phish has ever, has ever played.
Yeah,
Mostly,
and
and it's
I
not
think that could be the most overwhelming part too for a new person,
right,
right? And that's
right,
kind of where
right.
I started this podcast, with that mindset of like,
Hmm.
when I was a fan in '93, and I found the Dead first, and then Phish shortly thereafter. But like the Dead was a monolith, this huge catalog. And if a kid like
Right,
Reed, like we mentioned, 12-year-old kid getting into Phish now, and it's like you got all of this, not only of created but available. That
right,
is just like at any given moment, to your point, you could pull out that supercomputer in your pocket and just be like, I want to listen to this song from this show from this year, and not have to fast forward through a tape, skip over tracks on a CD,
right, right,
and worry about CDs getting scratched or tapes getting ruined, right? These
right,
are
right,
permanent
right,
record copies. So, yeah,
right.
I think that's a great answer.
I mean,
Technology.
sorry, so I didn't mean
No, no,
to
no, please, no.
interrupt you completely there. That's how I listen to, again, back to the podcast thing. At work, I listen to shows or podcasts all day. I work in an office. I work in, I have a, financial position, and I listen to this shit all day. And when I listen to your podcasts, um, I do it with re-listen open, and anytime something's mentioned that I haven't heard, I'm pausing the podcast. I'm going straight to that. I got to hear it. You know what I mean? And that's one of my favorite things in life right now, is like being able to, oh, you're talking about this jam from Milwaukee in 96 or whatever. You know what I mean? That it's a must hear, right? Well, I can pause you, I can open re-listen, start that jam, also go to .net and see the show notes, also read the show reviews. I can go to the helping friendly app and read anything I want about any, you know what I mean? You're right. It can be overwhelming to the noobs, but um it's it's exactly what I've been waiting for. I think the universe put me here at this time because I needed all of these things at the same time.
To connect it all together, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's a fair point too, right? They're all there for a reason, and I think it's a band that's always been tech savvy, even
Mm,
from the earliest years. And
true.
gosh, the fact that I still remember this is just shows you how much it's imprinted on my brain. But it was like Brown.edu was like some kid at Brown was where we were going to see set lists on a very
Nice.
early 1993 internet, right? So
That's insane.
yeah, it was, in hindsight, sure, and the Dead were a big, their whole Silicon Valley came out of the Grateful Dead,
Right.
in the
Right.
60s and stuff. So what do you think, you've seen this, you're coming up on your 20 years or right around 20 years of seeing the band.
Well, I just
uh
missed it was that last show that I went to, the 7:30:23
mhm.
was was 3 days before my 20th anniversary, which was 8/2/03. I would have I after the fact I went, God damn it, I had one chance to plan that to be at MSG 20 years to the day of my first show, and I blew that, but it was pretty darn close. But yeah.
So what was the most overwhelming aspect, like getting to the band in 2003? Like you mentioned, you got hit with the hiatus, right? So
Yeah.
that's gonna really slow down any kind of
Yeah.
progression when you can't see them live. What was overwhelming to you in 2003?
Um, not being able to, yeah, I mean, not being able to see them right away, not being able to see them enough, so right before hiatus, 1998, 99, 2000, when I was beginning to listen to this band, I had friends that took off to Great Woods to see them. I was 14 years old in 98. I absolutely, if I had um, if I had been raised in a different situation, I may have, I had like a lot of I had parents that told me I couldn't go, I
Mhm.
remember my friend Courtney, who is like one of my oldest friends. I still talk to her almost daily in our lives, and we were in like 10th grade together, I think, or ninth grade or something. She called and she's like, "There's a seat for you in the car. We're going to Great Woods." And I'm like, "Nah, my mom said I can't go." And she's like, "Well, you're a pussy," and hung up and, and went to the show.
You're still friends, so that's good.
Yeah,
You're still
totally.
friends to
Yeah.
this day.
So
But
it's so it's
go ahead.
that was what was tough, was that. And then as soon as I um had grown enough to get out from under my mom's thumb and whatever, it was hiatus time. So
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that's something that I didn't have to experience as a fan, and someone who's getting into the band nowadays doesn't have to experience. Thank God, is that they're touring, right? Like,
right,
so when I got into the band in the early 90s, it was like they were playing 200 plus shows a year. Like, it wasn't,
right,
you took it for granted versus, they weren't going to
totally,
be there. And now where they've kind of locked into this beautiful thing of like, we're doing 50 shows, you kind of got an idea where we're going to be, where we're going to do, make plans accordingly, that kind of thing.
right,
So,
right.
uh,
It
that
definitely has changed a
evolution,
lot.
yeah, but the evolution of it too, I think, speaks to the abilities that, that FOMO that built up
Yeah.
over time during the hiatus, right? And that question of,
Hmm.
someone who went to Coventry, whether they're going to come back or not was real,
Right,
right? Like that, after
right.
seeing that shit show, you're like, wow, they're better off. Maybe they shouldn't, right? Like maybe they
Yeah.
should just stay away.
Was that
So
you? I think that was you. I heard talking about that the other day on one of the episodes. Uh, Go ahead. Sorry.
oh yeah, well
Sorry.
Reed mentioned that he wanted to
It was
he was
Reed, huh?
wishing to
Yeah.
go back to wanting to listen to it, and I was like, I just don't know what kind of value there is to that. He's 12, he's got a whole
Yeah.
catalog of go listen to some crazy
Right.
stuff, and
Get some more fire under your belt built up before you go into that
yeah,
that
yeah.
darkness.
I don't listen to the Grateful Dead 1995 either, so like there's
Yeah. Right.
reasons, right? So
For sure.
so let's jump into this little questionnaire that I put together that I really like
Oh
doing with
yeah.
folks because I think it really encapsulates a lot of those conversations that happen out in the lot or during set break or before the show
Absolutely.
starts with your neighbors. So, um, 2003, we know you were getting into the band. What was the first Phish song you ever heard?
Is this first live song or
Nope, first
first
song
song?
you ever heard, whether through a radio or
The first song I ever heard was Squirming Coil. I'm going
the
to tell
Ball
you a
Boy
quick
version.
story. Yes, the studio version of Squirming Coil. I bought you remember the BMG music clubs in Columbia House and everything,
20
right?
for a penny or whatever.
Yes, exactly. I saw the Lawn Boy album on there. I said Phish with a PH. It's got to be cool, right? And I got Lawn Boy and Coil being the opening track on that. I popped it in. I heard Squirming Coil, and my brain broke and my heart opened. I know that sounds really cheesy, but really realistically, it was. I mean, I was into like Pearl Jam and all the grunge, a little bit of rap, and really it was. I had some of my parents' music under my dad was big into like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Ozzy and the Beatles. My mom was into Steely Dan and James Taylor and the Eagles and so actually had a really good music has been like the most important thing in my life since I was a very young child and so I had a pretty vast variety of music stuck in my head all the time to begin with, but this was different. Squirming Coil was different, man. You know what I mean? It had this, it had the guitar tones that the grunge stuff I was listening to had, but also it sounded sort of like some of the jazzy Steely Dan shit I had heard. It had
Some
like
kind of rock
and then
piano. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was like,
Yeah.
it was like so I listened to Coil and I was like, wow, okay. So Reba was up next. Same thing. I'm like, what is this? Right? My Sweet One came on. That was it. My brain couldn't do bluegrass. I don't know how old I was. I probably 10 or 11. I took the CD out and I didn't go back to it for a few years, but
I think you said something important there about like, and not being cheesy about it, because I think that people who are either listening to this podcast or listen to this band, right? Like there is this aha moment
yeah,
that where it becomes more than all the other bands combined you listened to before it, right? Like
yeah,
all that music history that
absolutely.
you had laid out in front of you, all those years had the opportunity to hit you the way the Squirming Coil hit you the first time you heard it,
Yeah,
right? And I feel the same way. Like I never heard a song until I saw them live, and Runaway Jim was the
really.
first song I ever heard. Yeah, it's like that.
Right. You were coming from Dead World.
Just and perfect timing. Like it was just like this is perfect. Like this is exactly what I wanted to see. This is what I want out of my music. Like so, I think that is, especially someone who'd be listening to a podcast, be part of a podcast about the band, you
Right.
definitely are going to have that experience.
Totally.
So when did you get to your first show?
That we covered briefly, but everything that you're going to ask me tonight has a friggin' story. I apologize in advance, but so when hiatus ended, they did that tour in 2003 in like February, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that tour came to Worcester. I think it was like maybe the 26th of February of 2003. Um, I caught a ride with some buddies to that show, but I did not have the drive that I needed to get into that show. That was a really hard
Tough
ticket.
ticket. Yeah.
The band just being back, and so I chuckle about that being, that would have been a really killer first show. But one thing I remember, I had a buddy who was a taper, and my friend Rex and I got home from Worcester that night and were able to listen to that show immediately on mini disc. He came over, we ate some fungus and got into that show that had just been played hours ago, and that blew my mind then, and it's still, I go like, wow, man, like without even having the
It's
technology we have
amazing.
now,
Yeah.
we were still able to re-listen to that show that same night. But so my
I
first
think
show
they
that I
started
made it
streaming
into,
around then, didn't they? Didn't they start
yeah,
their streaming around there, like 03 or something?
I
Like
remember learning about the first show that was webcast recently, but I can't remember the date, and it was
yeah,
driving me
somewhere in the
nuts.
early 2000s. It was earlier
It
than I
was.
thought. It was earlier than I
It
thought.
might have even
Right.
been. It might have even been 2000.
But yeah, that
Back.
03 comeback that
Right.
I got lucky enough to be at that Nassau show 28th, like the 2 nights later.
Yes.
And
Legendary show.
it's still battles out best show I've been to. Like I
Yeah.
go back and forth, but that show is eminently re-listenable.
Yeah. It's got
Has probably
the Hadron Collider.
yeah, it has like
Easily,
five
yeah.
best versions of 5 different
Yeah.
songs. But so what was the first show you finally got in the doors for?
The It Festival.
Okay, all right. Well, that's quite a
So
weekend to walk in the doors. Okay.
right. So I spent after that February show that I missed, I spent the next couple months crying in my cornflakes about it, and there was no way in hell I was missing it, especially like small town full of friggin' full of privileged hippie kids, you know what I mean? We rolled up there pretty deep to it, and
Loring, where was Loring Air Force
yeah,
Base?
Loring Air Force Base. The funny thing about that show was like living on Cape Cod here in Massachusetts. There are parts of Maine that I could hop on the highway and be in Maine in like 2.5 hours, right?
That's not one of them.
Bro, we were in the car for like 10 hours, and then we left early. We did not hit the traffic that some people talk about. We rolled up to the gates sometime on Thursday where we hit the dead stop traffic close enough to see the gate. We could see the gate. We weren't very far. It took us about 3 or 4 hours to get in there. And but that
that's a lovely
10-hour
story
drive there
compared
was,
to
I know,
some of the
I
horror
got
stories I've had, but like
I got the
that's
cushy
like the express lane.
yeah. So there was that, and then the day before the It Festival, I was drinking in the woods with my friends, like we tend to do here in well everywhere,
New
I'm
England,
sure. Yeah,
New England tradition.
I was gonna say that, but people are drinking in the woods everywhere right now, I'm sure. But
Yeah, if you grow up near
so,
woods, if not, it's
right,
like
right.
city parks.
I stepped on a 2x4 that was in the fire pit. It had some framing nails sticking out of it. These things went right into my foot, and
Ugh.
I went to the urgent care center in our town, and the person that saw me was like, I told him I was going to a festival. And can I still do that? And he's like, nah, you shouldn't go. And I'm like, sorry. But
I'd like another opinion.
yeah, right. I need a second opinion. One of the staff at the festival, when we were getting close enough to the gate that there was staff around, we were shooting the shit, and they used the radio and called somebody who went with us to where we were setting our shit up, and noted where it was, and then for every set throughout the weekend, they came and picked me up in a golf cart and one of my buddies, so I didn't have to hobble my way down to the.
So you got the express lane and the VIP treatment
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
weekend. That's pretty nice.
Yeah. But I will say I had to go into the medical tent a few times and have it like drained and
Phish
squeezed
providing
out,
socialized medicine too. Like who knew?
yep.
Right? Like that's fantastic.
It was a beautiful thing.
Is that your favorite? I know that show is legendary. Is that the most favorite show you attended, or is there another show that takes the cake?
No, for a long time I've 10/26/10 Manchester, New Hampshire. It was the last show of the fall 2010 run leading up to Halloween, right before the Little Feet Halloween in Atlantic City. That show was cosmic, man. At that point, that show was the like 30, maybe it was about halfway through my Phish career. It was like the 34th or 35th show I had seen. And I walked out of whatever they call the venue up in Manchester. I walked out of there like literally, like quite literally in shock. I couldn't really find the word. I couldn't find any words to really say what needed to be said. I couldn't really wrap my head. I wasn't on any psychedelics or, the band completely just took took my spirit and transported it somewhere for a while.
Yeah, that thing since caveman's been in rocks that happen to people, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just what happens sometimes with the
Dude.
music. It's gospel so
Yeah.
impactful and has that movement for people. So I feel that. I understand that
Yeah.
feeling completely. Is now with all these shows under your belt, is there a song that you're still chasing that you haven't heard that
Well,
you want to
here's
see?
the one, not the greatest thing, one of the coolest things about this conversation we're having tonight is it found me a white whale, man. I have not seen Gorilla Papyrus live.
Well, there we
And
go. And you got to hear at least when we break down this one. So
yeah, so
you
I didn't
you
know
got
that,
that one. That's
but
good.
I tend to go deep with the data and the information, the stats and stuff. And when I was listening to this, preparing for this conversation, I noticed, I'm like, man, I said, I wonder where I've seen Guelo, and I looked it up, and I have not seen it. So that is it. That's my
There
new
we
white
go.
whale. Because people have asked me before in the last few years, like, what are you chasing? I'm like, not much, but
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm willing to take whatever that comes at me at this
yeah,
point.
yeah. So
What's your favorite show that you haven't attended? Like, is there one on like you talked about this technology we have that you
right,
find yourself going
right.
to?
These questions are really hard to answer with one single answer. But if you had a gun to my head and I had no time to answer, the immediate show that comes to mind is the Wipeout show.
Yeah, it's fun.
11/27/98
Is that
in
Massachusetts
Worcester.
too?
That was
Yeah, well,
Worcester. Yep.
yeah.
Worcester is like
Home away from
is like
home.
the former Mecca for these guys,
Yeah, I think that was like the
at
real,
one point in time.
the big city that accepted them outside Burlington before they got to Boston,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
like then Mike's from that area down in Mansfield,
Right.
so I think that's you get those local fans, and I think somebody went to college. One of the early connectors to the band went to college down there and got him the gig. So like,
Sure.
and the fans love it. That you got a concentration of colleges in that
Yes.
area, especially Worcester
Very.
and North Adams and all that kind of area.
Yeah. It's very
Um,
central. Worcester's
yeah,
very central to the
it's a
whole
good place
state of
to be
Massachusetts.
a hippie band
Yeah.
with some chops. You're gonna
Right.
get some good following. That's Goose, like all those guys coming out of New England.
Right. So there's the Wipeout show. There's a few that are right up there that tie, like Halloween '96, the
Sure.
Remain in Light show. Um uh shit. Halloween 2010, the 10/30/2010, the Led Zeppelin tease show, and then
Hmm.
the next night when they played Little Feat are shows that I have, like, a whole story that goes with that, and I'll save that for another time. But let's just say I was kicking myself in the ass at the morning of of those shows, so I
When
wasn't
you heard them
there.
back the next day, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What song you hooked on right now?
This kind of goes with one of the questions I asked you before we started recording, but so there's a Trey Anastasio and Tom Marshall written song that debuted at let's see, in June, right before summer tour this year. Trey played 3 shows out in Colorado as a trio with John Fishman and Desron Douglas.
Yeah,
Those shows, if you haven't heard them, are excellent. Just as an aside, but there's a
yeah, I heard they're
song he
like they're
debuted.
like crazy, just like kick ass type shit. Like they're just
Yeah,
like burn it down.
they're heavy. They're yeah. There's like those shows sound like Trey's playing for his life, and that's when a lot of the times I love Trey the most. But there's a song that he debuted on the first night of that run called it's called Where They'll Find Us. That's a hard one. That's a hard one to say at normal speed, but Where They'll Find Us. It's a song that him and Tom wrote recently. It starts off with just a pretty basic reggae type groove, and then where the chorus kicks in, it takes this major fucking turn to like a major seven on the one, and it just does this really weird thing that I've never heard in any other, like, reggae type groove like that before. It's absolutely nothing mind-blowing, but these like really like emotional sentimental lyrics mixed with this weird hook just completely do it for me. And I heard it for the first time probably 4 months ago, I'd say, and I've listened to it almost every day of my life since then. I start my day with it. It's such a beautiful song, man.
I love those fixations, man. I love
Yeah,
that.
I can't get it out.
What's your favorite studio album?
Again, it's a hard one to answer. You know what I mean? But what do they say? Sometimes the right answer is the most simple one, staring you right in the face or
Occam's
whatever.
Razor.
It's Story of the Ghost, man. Story of the Ghost is
It's a great album.
yeah, it came along right. It was pretty new right when I was getting into the band, and there was a period of my life where it's all I listened to for months on end, man. And it had its 25th anniversary pretty recently, and I listened to it again. It's been probably, it's got to be 2 or 3 years straight that I haven't listened to it in its entirety, the studio album, and it holds up, man. It takes me right back, and I love it, man.
Definitely does. Yeah, I got it on vinyl a while ago, and it definitely listened to it back for the first time in a long time. That thing definitely holds up over all the time. That run,
Simplistic.
that run from like Billy Breeze to Farmhouse is just some of their best stuff.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cover song they do?
Oh my God. So difficult to answer these questions, Bill. So if let's see, I have to break things down and explain things. If it's a song that they've played one time, right? There's a song called "I'll Come Running to Tie Your Shoes." They played it. It's a Brian Eno song. They played it once. They played it at that benefit show in Lowell, Massachusetts, to open 1995.
Was that
Where
the the pro-choice benefit?
Yeah, I
The
believe that's what it
pro-life
was. It
benefit, the
was like,
pro-life benefit, pro-choice benefit,
yeah,
whatever it was. Yeah,
whichever. Yeah,
whichever
it
the
was
good
like
one
one of
was. Yeah,
it's like it
whatever
was
the
like
right
one of the
answer.
it was like one of the first shows of 1995. It was in May
Yeah,
1995. Yeah, they debuted a whole bunch of stuff. Spock's
yeah, Spock's
Brain
brain,
and
right? Yes, yeah.
maybe Free. I think Free maybe. And
Yep.
anyway, they played this song called "I'll Come Running to Tie Your Shoes." It's a really great song by Brian Eno. But then if you want to talk about classic, like, songs they've been playing for a long time, I gotta go with Reed's answer on that, man. Talking Heads. I love Cross-Eyed. I love Cities. I love Skin It Back. Little Feet.
Yeah, I think Isaac had said that one too in one of my earlier
Isaac. Maybe that
podcasts. I
was
think,
Isaac and not
no.
Reed. Yeah,
Reed said Cross-Eyed and
did he?
Painless, and Isaac said Skin It Back. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
Little
Skin It
Feet's been
Back. I
popping up
was
a lot lately.
I was at the 7/3 2012 show at Jones Beach where they busted that out, and Happiness is a Warm Gun, both of them in the first set, and it became like the biggest gap, uh whatever they call that, Zizek's stats and
Yeah.
everything.
Since
The
the class
biggest the
played.
biggest bust out show ever in band history because of those two songs. But and then if you want to get into newer covers, I really love. I was at the July 3rd and 4th shows down in Alpharetta 2010 when they played Killing in the Name. Place went nuts. And also I really really love Golden Age.
Yeah, it's grown
So
on me. Yeah, the original
yeah,
is so cool, and it's like so
yeah,
funky. It's just a really interesting, and they don't cover a lot of modern
right,
art, like contemporary artists, right? Like some
right.
folks who are their peers. They don't really cover a lot, so it's really interesting when you hear something like that, and a Brooklyn band, right? Like you don't expect that.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It's one
so
of
I
those
asked.
bands I probably never would have, heard of or gotten into if not for Fish. And I have a couple of their albums in my library now, and they're a nice, like, raw, like, artistic band, they're good.
Yeah, I just saw a documentary they're in, like something about smoking in the bathroom, something like that. And it's about
Wow,
like the
I'll have
Brooklyn
to check it
scene in
out.
like that early 2000s with like Strokes and all those people. But
No
they came
shit.
out of that show, out of that scene in Brooklyn.
Right on.
So I've been asking everybody this question, and the song is the mood, is really the vibe that I'm going for here as far as what you're feeling. So,
Yeah.
boy, man, God, or shit.
Shit.
like
Always,
Clay,
man.
like Clay Davis in The Wire.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Shit. But yeah, no, I love those. I love the ones where it's just like shit.
All
You know,
smooth.
but yeah, yeah, yeah. Shit, always, man.
So that's a great answer. I think that might be the first shit we've gotten. So that's good. That's good.
You're the first shit we've
You're the
gotten.
first shit we got. So let's jump into the show. The show that we are going to talk about is something that a lot of people are familiar with from especially my era where if I remember correctly, it was on the radio. So there was like a lot of FM copies that may have went around and there were
Yes.
soundboards that flew around, but like this was something that everybody had a copy of. And that is 12/31/93 from the
Yes.
aforementioned Worcester Centrum.
Centrum, yeah.
That was
Was
one
it?
of their. Was it the Worcester Centrum? Yeah, Worcester Centrum back then. I don't know what it is now.
I gotta check myself.
TD
Yeah.
Bank, First Union, something probably, but like
Yeah,
this
right.
is a place that a venue that the podcast that Reed and I did. We cover a show from 2 years after this,
Yes.
from the same venue.
Right.
They this we talked about. This is a city that's embraced them outside of Vermont, and
Yes.
to me, a three-set New Year's show with the ability of the FM broadcast,
Yeah. That's
and
huge.
yeah, and I think it's something antiquated, right? Like that we won't, with technology being an answer earlier.
Right.
This is something that doesn't happen anymore.
Yes. That radio station, WBCN, that's what I grew up on. That's like the original alternative rock in the Boston and Metro West and Massachusetts area. Yeah. So um they they
You,
did they did other concerts throughout my childhood besides just Phish. That's and that yeah, you're right. That doesn't happen anymore because nobody listens to terrestrial radio anymore.
right,
You know what I
right, right.
mean?
It's not.
It's
It's
a
part of the evolution, I guess, of
right.
technology to what you were talking about before.
De-evolution.
Well, yeah, and I think this was like
Yeah.
the first, and I know the Dead had done that in the '70s, and
Right.
AEW in the city in New York City was a
Hmm.
big broadcaster of those things. And I think
Right.
it's something that's just like, it's almost cute in its antiquation now to be like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, and like only people in this broadcasting area were able to hear it loud and clear, right?
Right.
Where now to the point of like supercomputer in your pocket, all the shows wherever you go.
Hmm. Right. And you
But
imagine
what
how many people were you imagine how many fans that whereas like on a normal night you got your small percentage of tapers in the house, right? How many people you think had a stack of blank tapes next to their radio that night, on New Year's Eve
enough to
1993?
make sure that this kid over in Poughkeepsie in college was getting the
Right,
copies, right? Like, because
right,
we weren't getting that signal, right? Because that's what I
right.
was going to say to you, right? Like, that signal was only going to encompass, you know, the
100
greater
miles. Yeah,
Massachusetts, Boston area, maybe,
right.
right? Like,
Yep.
did Worcester even get it? Like, it's probably still a distance from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
But
Worcester would get it. Worcester would get it much further west
Rhode
than
Island,
Worcester.
with like Providence.
Providence probably would.
Okay, so you would get outside of the Massachusetts area at least a little bit
Yeah,
with it, right?
I think maybe Manchester, New Hampshire probably would.
Okay,
And
so they're a
that's about it.
tri-state band at this point,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So, but like, how cool is that? That
It's
they were
very
still
cool.
enough typed into the scene to
Yeah,
get this show out there, and like for a business like a radio station to know
right.
that they were going to get enough ears on New Year's Eve. to be
Right. I would
home with
like
a
to know
stack of tapes,
actually.
right? Like,
I maybe should have looked this up because, and I didn't think of it until, sometimes two are better than one here, two brains here. But I wonder like who's credited with that, who was working for WBCN at the time that was hip enough. You know what I mean? They weren't on the
some
radio
college
anywhere else.
intern, some
Right.
college
Right.
intern
Somebody
pulling
said you
tapes was
guys need,
like,
yeah,
yeah, they were like,
broadcast
we'll
this.
do it. Don't pay
Yeah.
us. We're good. We'll get it out there,
Right. Or
right? And I
maybe
think
like, maybe Paluska knew
that's
somebody
what I'm
or,
thinking is probably
yeah.
somebody in that Massachusetts mafia that they knew, was
Yeah.
connected to something that they had to
Right.
get. But again, you know, one of the things, when I try to explain to people all this time later, I've been listening to this band for 30 years, because they still don't know who they are because they don't have a radio hit and they don't have a hit
Right.
album. And it's
Right.
like, this is all word of mouth, man. Like
Yeah.
enough cool people saw this that they told other cool people, and they all got
Right.
together and told more cool people, and that's how we got to here. It's like, I guess if with the Simpsons line, like, how do you know if you're cool? It's like, you just know, right?
You
Like
just
that's the
know.
line. You just know. Like nobody's got to tell you, and like if you don't know who they are, then you missed, right? Like
Right,
it just
right.
didn't come
But you
across your
have to
peripheral
ask.
for a reason. Yeah, yeah. If you have to say with a PH, then
Yeah,
you
right.
know. But I think what we hear here in this show, and it's because of the quality and the location and the band, is the energy
Right,
that is in this crowd
bro.
and the nervous energy on stage
Yeah,
as they you know are welcomed on that stage by that rabid audience that we were talking about.
yeah,
um I alluded to that nervous energy from them,
right.
which I think is quite palpable on these FM soundboard recordings,
Sure.
during Llama especially. But the Llama that they come out with is next level
Yeah.
Phish.
Uh it's very okay, so the first note that I have is I know this is a soundboard, but this is it's a 30-year-old show. This happened
That's
30 years ago and the crowd noise is uh is more bonkers than almost it's the first thing I noticed. I'm like, these people are gonna go fucking crazy, are gonna explode waiting for the band to start playing. And as soon as they start playing, it's like the grand finale of a fireworks. Just like the place is just going nuts.
Yeah, you would think the Llama is the encore, right? Like
Right. I'm
they just saw a show. I
yeah,
have a note here, like locked in from the start, but they almost
immediately.
seem so nervous and so excited that they're almost out of control. Like the Llama is so
Right,
fast,
right.
which I think leads to the next song because I think
Yeah,
that they need to like catch their breath for a sec because like it's a really
absolutely.
interesting first set for a New Year's show, like what we would think a
Yeah.
New Year's show to be.
And
Um,
I would add to after like the year that 93 was, I was also the 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 first set is very it's very tight, it's very clean, very I mean, back then there was a lot more type 1 than you get now. But it's a very clean cut. The thing that makes this first set legendary is how much energy was bouncing around that place. You know what I mean?
100%. From
Yep.
the kickoff, right? Like that's unquestioned. They take their foot off the gas a little bit, but I think the crowd is still into like that stop start,
Yep.
aspect of Galula, and then they go into a perfect like this first set, a perfect stash, and then
Yeah.
like a very weird. I didn't write weird, right? But I wrote acoustic washboard
Yeah.
driven Ginseng Sullivan, and we're talking like four songs into the
Yep.
show.
Yeah.
And then I put a question mark, a yes. I don't know if there was a yes tease somewhere in
there
there. I don't
was.
know.
There
Okay, so
was.
all right.
Right at the beginning, Trey plays a few chords from the song Roundabout.
Okay,
And you can hear people
yeah.
going nuts. The crowd is going nuts for every, like, I'm these guys are like, anything they're doing, the crowd's going absolutely crazy. It was really funny at the end of Guelo Papyrus. Trey says, or it was actually, I think it was in the middle at one of the pauses. He goes, everybody in yet? And
Oh
like
yeah, well
chuckles.
it's the audience check-in. I wrote it right because, and I think I know why. My first show was 2 nights before this,
Oh yeah,
and there was a blizzard that hit New England.
2 nights.
The 29th, New Haven.
In DC. Oh, in at New Haven.
29,
Okay,
yeah, 29, 12/29/93, and
gotcha.
there was a blizzard that hit New England.
Okay,
So my guess is that it was still, just how those used to hang around, and the ice would build. People wouldn't get into the show until
yeah,
3 songs in. So I think
right,
that's what we're hearing there, and then they definitely let them know they're there.
yeah.
To that point,
You
and then I'll
got
have that.
uh Ginseng Sullivan. The end of that is when Trey introduces Phish's greasy physique for the first time.
For the first time in the first set.
Yeah,
And that was one of those things that I thought was really interesting, was that like there was like he's out front and center at least 2 or 3 times just in the
yep,
first set alone.
right.
Usually that's like a once towards the end of the show kind of fun, which we get again.
Right.
But again, this is Fishman out front twice early.
I thought it was. I had to look up. Greasy physique was not a Fishman moniker that I was familiar with, so I had to do a little research, and turns out that this show was the first time he was called that, and that ended up going into the liner notes on Hoist, I think it was.
He looked like a greasy physique on Hoist, like in those pictures
Yeah,
from like the Coney Island era
yeah.
pictures. Yeah,
So
those
then
things.
he calls him that again throughout this show, and then in the show you did with Isaac a couple episodes ago, he calls him
94.
greasy physique in that show too. It's
Yeah,
a good
95.
name.
It's that, yeah, it must be something about him during that era that resonated. And back to your theme for this first set, which I really like. We said, about that, you have veteran ears on this show too. Is that like this first set's known for this kind of like perfection, and all I did was
Yep.
put Reba in all caps.
Yeah.
A 93 Reba is, I mean, that's probably a top 2 or 3 song that people were coming to see at that point, I would imagine.
Right. You can hear so that's the fifth show of the night song. Jesus Christ. It's the fifth song of the night.
Did he call Fishman that too? I don't remember that.
No, right. It's the fifth song of the night, and it's actually from what I hear, they go even more nuts for Reba, the crowd, than they did for Llama at the beginning of the show.
Well, interesting you say nuts.
Roar.
And that's interesting you say that, because I in the next track, right? And I know he just passed away, and it almost seemed they did play it at the show I was at in New Haven.
Right.
But it almost seemed like they had to play it. I don't know what it was, because it comes up a bunch during the rest of this show, right? It pops up like a little.
So, looking at it right now, they played it out of these four. The 4 shows from this run, they played it 3 of the shows.
I think Frank passed a couple weeks before that.
He did, yeah.
Right. So that probably why, but I don't know what it was about the way the audience responds to this in this version, in this show. But
super
to
high
me,
energy.
yeah, like they were expecting it, right? Like they're like, and maybe it was because it's those old heads that have been with them since, they've been covering that song. I think I covered it with Ivy in '88 when we did a show at Nectar's, right? Like these folks who are in Worcester, to what we've been saying, are some of those oldest fans of the band.
Right.
So I think there was almost like, it was almost like this level of expectation that they knew that had to be played that night, right? And
right.
they nailed it, right? And
It was
they
perfect
perfect.
placement. Perfect coming out of
Yeah.
the end of that Reba jam, right into the opening drums of Peaches is like one of the best placed song decisions I can remember hearing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That is so smooth and so perfect and sounds so good. And that's what I mean, the audience is responding to that too, you know.
100%, and then into a song that like I don't know if there's a transition out of anything else into it with I didn't know, right? And it always seems to be, but again, another Fishman out front moment.
Right, right,
2 out of the first 7 songs. That's a good stat to go find, right? Like how many times does that happen?
right.
That feels like a party house thing, right? Like
Sure.
where Fishman comes out front. And then the reception they get for Antelope,
Yes. Yeah.
which is probably goes back to that thing we're talking about with those old fans, those original
Right, right.
fans.
And was the reception for Antelope, or was the reception for Tom Marshall, when you got a house full of family and close friends,
Well, both. I think
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I wrote Tom. I have that note here, and I said really
Hmm.
fun. And that becomes a tradition. With Tom
Yep.
coming out to do those lyrics, and I think, but the tempo of it um leaves that table set,
Yeah.
in my opinion, for the next 2 sets of
Right.
Fish, right?
And
Where you're
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say where you're I would imagine, right? Like being a fan there and being left with that as the taste of, oh shit, we got 2 more sets to go.
Yeah, exactly.
With a ripping Antelope and we're just getting the part. I think maybe Trace says something about that, like, hey, relax, this is gonna be a good night, we're gonna be here a while, that kind of stuff. But like
Right,
that to me is 93 Fish, right? Like, oh shit, Antelope's not ending things.
right.
It's like
That
setting the
was
table.
it sounds the way I sort of perceived, you got your first set is very so 93 is a transitional year, and as much it's there are some year I feel like there are some years that are transitional and other years that are growth and expansion, and 93 houses both of those things
Mm-hmm.
perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're coming out of very machine gun tray tight high energy 92, right? And headed into exploratory 94, 95, 96, and beyond. And this show, this first set is a nasty 1992 first set. And the second and third set are your 1993 off the wall bonkers. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
not,
I mean,
and
would you say,
this
would
is
you,
not black,
no, go
black
ahead,
and white,
Fish.
but it's a very clean, tight first set. You know what I mean? Um,
Would you say that it's them shedding the skin of 90, like of
yeah,
92,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then
That's
like,
exactly what I mean. We're going into a new year. We just spent an entire year, pushing different songs and different jams to whatever limits. You know what I mean? Are there any limits really?
no,
Anyway, or
well,
maybe
at this point there is, right? I think to that point there is, and I think what's interesting, and I'm peeking ahead here, is that um with that mind's eye towards shedding of the skin, future,
right, right.
change, is that the song coming out of Old Lang Syne isn't the song we know today, but it's the song, like it's the
No,
jam of that. So we'll get to that, but that's a really,
we'll get to
let's
that.
pick that up when we get to that, because I think that's a really interesting way to look at these next 2 sets, right?
Right,
With
right.
that in our view, because this tweezer that kicks off, right, the tweezer that kicks off the second set is that
Right.
is exactly what you're saying, right? And
Yeah.
because my notes here are this: it's not that it's a quick intro tweezer,
Right.
which means like what I love about a modern tweezer is like the mic build up of the boom, like
Yes.
that kind of
Yes.
stuff. And there's none of that here, right? They're really right into the song of Tweezer, right? There's no build up to the release.
Right.
Which I was, back to your analogy of 92 into 93, and I wrote, that's not like today.
No,
And
it's not at all.
where it really transcended to me was, and I had to go back and listen to it twice because at first I missed it, and then I went, and the second time I was listening to it, I was like, this jam is falling apart. I was like, this is right, like right somewhere around the 7-minute mark. I'm like, I don't know, what are they doing? And then all of a sudden, in the 8-minute mark on, they are just the four-headed monster.
Oh, yeah. I got right here 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, 8:30. I have that written down myself. That's
right,
very funny.
Mike.
Yeah.
That is so up until your 8:30, from when the lyrical part of the song ends up until your 8 minutes and 30 seconds. There's a lot going on. It's very
Individualistic, it feels like,
yeah.
right? Like almost
Yes.
like they're not connected. They're playing, but they're
Right.
not like in the find your own head moment.
You got a weird, not weird, but you got this polka type almost jam going on for a little bit where Phish is playing double time and there's these different segments, and it's almost comical, but not comical like laughing at it in any way. It's just like cheerful, joyful, comical, and it's there's percussive aspects to it. Paige and Trey hook up a few times where Paige is playing a chord and Trey is finishing it with the high end. It's really cool, right? But 8:30, Mike drops like a medium-sized bomb, right? A 3/4 size bomb,
and they all change.
Snaps them. Yes, immediately snaps out of it and hits this
next level.
Shoot.
It bumps up a level. Yeah.
And
it made me go back because I was like, whoa. That was like, it was almost like it was planned, right? Because it was just so in sync. It was almost like, was that part of the music, the way it changed to that perfection?
Right.
But yeah, it's great that you had that same point I did.
Yeah, and from there, so I know Trey's still that so they're playing that now. They got a nice groove, and Trey is the one. Trey's still pushing. He's pushing hard.
Yep.
And it gets around 10 minutes. It gets to this almost Tweezer reprise type like victory, like this real like positive, like the end of a fucking boxing movie where the
Rocky's getting up.
The underdog just won, and it's like and then it just they start to come down, right? There's not I wouldn't say that there's some kind of crazy greatest version of all time peak there, but they do some cool shit before they wind down.
I mean, literally, it's like you're looking at my notes because I wrote everyone connects at 8:30. The playing ascends into the 10-minute mark. Trey's playing some cool shit. And then I wrote teasing with a question mark at the 11-minute mark. Like, is he? I think he's teasing. I wasn't sure what it was, but I think you and I use the same verbiage. They were just. It was some really cool stuff that they're playing there, and really, I really like that analogy you made about that. This new year, new you kind of mindset of this show, where this is, that moment. That 8:30 moment is what gets everybody. And I know it got me a couple nights before when it was whatever it was that night that hooked me, right? Like that's the thing that gets people when you watch the magic happen live or back on tape. And to your point earlier, that shit still stands up 30 years later. And you're like, oh, that's still really, really good. Okay, great. Going into a Haley's and Poor Heart. My note here, which is funny, and I think this is more about how much I've been listening to this era because of the podcast, is the frequency of these songs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I forgot how much they used to play Poor Heart. That was one that was, it gets people you're still dancing. It's not going to be any more than 4 or 5 minutes, right? It's going to just be what it is. Right, exactly.
It's
If that
and it
three, it's like my sweet one, 3 minutes, maybe,
right.
So
It's high energy. It breaks up the groove a little bit. You know what I mean?
mhm.
It snaps people out of that groove for a few minutes. Where you can kind of whoa, where holy shit, here I am, and have a laugh when Fishman screams and woos
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
the hootenanny of it
super
all,
high
right?
energy.
And I think what's interesting is that this is another earlier show where I didn't know, and Haley's comment, written by the same person, somebody not in the band, but also
Right.
showing up in the show, and it goes back to wondering, okay, old heads, are they playing this because is that person in the
Right.
crowd, right? Like, so who
Totally.
knows? But they get it in. And then, like, the fact that you brought this whole analogy up now, and this is people are gonna probably shit all over this because we're gonna beat
Oh
the
yeah.
dead horse on it, but like,
Oh,
it goes right to this next part too. I think with It's Ice and Fee, I think you
dude.
you hear this It's Ice that's like riff had come out a couple months before,
Yeah.
so it's still new-ish as far as like for me it was. I know that from 2 nights before. Like this, that was riff was going to be my thing for the next couple of months after that show.
Right.
And Fee through the megaphone, which was probably turnkey then, I would imagine. But like
Yeah.
hearing it on tape and the youthful sound of them, right? And then again, a song that old school people, the crowd, once they hear that Fishman kick in with the
Yeah.
stick,
Totally.
like they're like,
Totally.
oh, we know this song.
Right. Fee was executed perfectly. Trey remembered the lyrics. That's we don't always get these days. When I was a kid, Trey knew the words to Fee. Um,
No, he didn't.
back
He
to
needed a teleprompter in Sugar Bush. Remember they made fun of that was '94. So
right. Back to It's Ice for a second is I have a note here about how much fun I think at this point that a lot of that nervous anxious energy that the band may have been carrying has subsided.
yeah, they dropped it at the 8:30 mark of Tweezer.
Yeah, right. That's when Mike
Never
said
looking back.
bang.
Yeah, never looking back after
That
that.
was musical Xanax there for everyone, but because you hear at the beginning of It's Ice, you hear I think it's Trey. I can't tell who goes. It's like, yeah, when you hear like somebody they
Yeah.
start playing It's Ice, you hear yeah, and it's a really tight. I mean, It's Ice is always back in those is very up tempo, very tight. And I feel like this so something I started writing about with a question mark and said maybe this is something to explore is like at another time is 1991 and 92 there could be an argument made that Fish Fishman and Gordon and Page were um backup in a way for Trey. You know what I mean? They were they
Sure.
were they were Ernie in the backup band or whatever, right? This It's Ice is one of a good amount of songs that are coming down the pike here that absolutely take that focus off of Trey's fast fingers and his ability to play anything under the sun however he wants to, you know what I mean? And It's Ice really highlights Page, and this is again speaking to the transition, shedding skin, what have you. It's Ice is one of those songs that really, really encapsulates the band. You listen to It's Ice, it's not Trey shredding with three guys playing a groove behind him. This is a very Page centric song, a very Fishman centric song. It's
Yeah, I think it's that's a good analogy for them, I
uh,
think at this point, right? Because you use the backup band analogy, and I don't think that was ever by design. I think it was by,
no,
talent, right?
right,
Like somebody
right,
was better, somebody was the captain of the team versus,
right,
everybody being of equal talent, where now it's
right.
like any given
I
night, whoever's playing it is holding it down. And I think you
right,
said something about here with It's Ice and Page. And like I got a note for a song coming up later this set where, someone else in the band who I think is highlighted, um, that speaks to what you're saying there as well, right?
Sure.
Because it was never by design to be that
Right.
way. And I think, and it was a conscious decision 2, 3 years later for them to put the guitar down and start playing, drums on stage, just
Right.
so that everybody else can get involved. But I think, yeah, it's ice style,
Yes.
right? To your point, is becomes the cars, trucks, buses, and the
Oh,
the
I love
things
it.
that that Page drives
Right.
the band more
Yeah.
than a guitar driven uh, thing. I read something the other day, and I think I brought it up in the podcast I just did the other day about uh, Trey's ability to be a lead guitarist and rhythm guitarist at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And It's Ice is the perfect example of that.
Sure. Sure. He's got
Like he's
there's
holding it down and leading at some point. So you're like, I don't know how he's doing this. He's just a
right.
wizard.
There's really brilliant composition there, and there's also, yeah, exactly. He's also keeping rhythm. Should be mentioned that this is I don't know if this is the first time throughout this show. It's the first time I have a note of it, but there's peaches and regalia teases throughout the rest of this show, and
Throughout,
this
yeah.
when you get to the breakdown and it's ice where it gets quiet. You got peaches teases. You got
Yeah.
secret language, which is man, I don't want to take up a ton of time on that, but I just real quick is like not being around back in those days, and only hearing what I've heard, especially in the past. Secret language was something where I'd hear my buddy go like, "Oh yeah, that show, that whatever date they did secret language," and at some point my brain created this idea that the secret language was rare and done not very often. And when you go into the .net secret language chart, it's like hundreds of shows. You know what I mean?
Well, what's interesting is
Um,
that the podcast I just recorded, it's not even out yet. We did a show from '92 at the Capitol
uh-huh.
Theater where during Run Like an Antelope, Trey breaks
Oh,
down all the secret language for the crowd.
there's like yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's like boom, 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 and that's where it kind of goes into this whole thing about like it's always been an inside thing. It's always been an inside joke,
Right.
right? Like you
Yeah.
got to educate the people. So yeah, it's funny you bring that up because that was just a topic of conversation in one of the last episodes I did.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
so now we get into a possum lawn boy combo that I think really
Yes.
talking about those two people we were just talking about, Paige and Mike. These two songs obviously highlight those characters very well.
That's funny.
Uh,
Yeah, the first note I have for this possum is high energy and Mike's voice is silky. You
yeah.
get Trey giggling a couple times in this one, and it's yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's the way I felt about that. These two songs specifically, right? Like I think the Lawn Boy is the same. Like there's this really interesting
right.
thing about the fan base. You talk about this open heart, open mind, right? Like when you get
Yeah.
into it. But then the more you get into it, the more you have to be. You don't have to. Like Reed says,
Oh,
Reed doesn't do the acapella, right? Reed's going to the
right.
bathroom. That's fine. But like when they're
I
gonna
love it.
do, a song like Possum, followed by a song like Lawn Boy,
Yeah.
right? I think it's like, and the crowd loved the Lawn Boy, right? Like
Yep.
they just love that hamming,
Yep.
jazz room, backroom style, piano lounge singer act.
Yep.
So then, and I guess it's because how I've been conditioned to this point in the band. When I heard it when we were listening through it, I was like, "Oh, this is the end." I was like, "That's weird. They're ending the second set like that." And then I'm like, "There's no way." And then I look, and of course not. And they end the second set with that song that probably everybody in attendance couldn't wait to hear that night because this was the thing that I got most of these people in their dorm rooms hooked the first
Right.
time around. Um,
That song.
that song, right? And I think it's you enjoy myself, and it's its own beast, and it's gotten the knock when Trey didn't want to play it anymore, and now he'll play it every night if he had to. So it's one of those songs that I
Right.
think it could easily be looked at as a non-composed, craziness, is because the end always ends with the vocal jam.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
what really stood out to me, because it really is such a heavily composed piece in the front and a loose piece on the back end, is that in this version, two things stood out. Three things, pardon me. One, around the 12-minute mark, this thing just jumps off the page. Like they just hit um, a, a level that had been kind of building this whole set from the Tweezer jam. Did you hit that? That's how we hold it up to the camera. 12:15. Is that what I just
Would you
saw?
say right around 12:15?
I would say somewhere in that general vicinity.
Yeah.
So good. You heard the same thing. The other notes I had were one of the longest vocal jams I've probably ever heard.
It was very long.
I don't know if CK had a new rig for that show and they were just, doing it for the sake of like running through the lights or whatever they were doing it for, because it was long. Like it was long. Like when the second time I listened to it, I skipped over because I was like, I don't need to hear this again.
Yeah.
And then the other part that I alluded to earlier that I think really stood out is Mike's bass.
Yeah.
His playing on this is really like one of those things where, you talked earlier about, the backup band, but this shows where 93 is going. And you're still 4 years away from the cow funk era of
Right.
Mike taking the reins, but this is like, you could hear it. You could hear some of that early on in that Yem with him.
Absolutely. I have notes about Manteca. New Year's Eve 2010 was the only New Year's show I've made it to, and that's the they play You Enjoy Myself, Manteca, You Enjoy Myself, and ever since then I can't unhear Manteca in the groove part of You Enjoy Myself. But it's real, dude. We have very similar notes. I wrote, I can't unhear the Manteca, but it's a great groove and it's a great funky jam, and it 100% alludes to 1997 coming down the pike. They got the funk in them. Trey jumps back out in front abruptly, but it's Mike and Phish doing some dark funk. And I can only I love when I love the cheesy stuff that is the fun stuff, the laughter, and I love when Trey dances at the end,
To
before.
Mike's.
I can only imagine him dancing, right? There's no visual for this show, but I can imagine him grooving up
Yeah,
there
his
to
nerd
this
dancing.
one. Yeah,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah. He
that's
loves
a nice
letting
dark
Mike go.
funk. Good.
So yeah, I think we're both in agreement there with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's definitely something that, again, just like the way they left that first set with Antelope, and
Right.
now the second set with this really appropriate Yem for a New Year's Eve with the long vocal jam. And then like they come out for the third set, and it's really, to me, it was pretty interesting because it's like a no frills Old Lang Syne, right? Like it's just like
Right.
straight into it. And interestingly enough, this Down with Disease jam is labeled as Down with Disease, but it's a Down with
Right.
Disease jam in my opinion. There's no lyrics.
Right.
It's just that sound that we all know and love, and it kind of reminds me of listening to it. My mind goes to the scene in Bittersweet
Bittersweet
Motel.
Motel.
Yeah, I'm like, because then I'm like, did they use that? Like, I'm like, yeah, that kind of reminded me of that scene.
Right.
So
It's
it was really good though. Like, and it really, again, back to that analogy, it really, Hoist comes out later in that spring in 94 ish, right?
I
Somewhere
believe
around
so.
there. So like,
Right.
is it even fully formed? It's been played at that point, but like just to play around with it like that was awesome, and to let.
Right. I'm not sure that I agree that it should be considered the debut of Down with Disease. And
No.
the only note that I really made about it is something that you just briefly mentioned earlier in our conversation here, that I wrote that it's it's a by the books down with disease jam, and it absolutely does not foreshadow what that song would become in any way, shape, or form. It's
No.
the melody, it's the melody of, the studio, recorded studio version, and really that part that everyone knows is Down with Disease. And it's fucking amazing because it's like, I mean, it's a major, you know, signpost in the
Mhm.
history of this band, that has become such a monster part of this band's DNA, that it's an honor to hear, when they decided it was ready to be played in front of people. But it's night and day from what it was that night and what it has become, and the places
Yeah.
it's taken us.
Yeah, the note I had about it was that to me, there was this little, um, like Clapton-esque sound from like Let It Rain.
Sure.
Like, like at that end, that
I hear
outro
you.
on Let It Rain. Like and which is interesting now because like with that Layla project that he did with Derek, that
Right.
I could
Right.
hear it. You hear his playing, so it could be so similar, but like I was making sure I had to check myself. I'm like, are you hearing something you're not hearing? But I think, I don't think it's a tease. I just think it's kind of like a tonality thing and
Yes,
a kind of a
absolutely.
speed thing on an outro. But just a little observation I made
I
there with the down
Yeah,
disease.
I agree with you 100%.
And then, really interesting as they kind of, I don't, they put the work in. I think that's how I'm going to phrase this. Like on the next couple tracks, they put a really strong driving melt. Like this wasn't like, hey, we're gonna take this thing out, but we're gonna just
Right.
like, hey, we've been busting our ass all night and watch how
Right.
good we could still
Right.
play.
Right. It's been a long night at this point.
100%. And what's even crazier is that what's about to happen, right? So
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I
Right.
was, as I'm re-listening to this, and I'm like, all right, this split's great. Lizards has one of my most favorite outros of any Fish song
Yes.
ever. I just love that guitar
I wrote
part
the
and
same thing. Always
it's so perfect.
I wrote that. It's always been one of the most beautiful of all their songs.
Yeah, and
You
then the
know?
next two with Sparkle and Susie, it's like I wrote warm frequency and warm response, right? Because
Yeah,
they were both played very straightforward. You could hear
absolutely.
the response of the fans to Susie, of that familiarity that we're talking about with some of these older songs,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So they're kind
It's
of
a
like, all right, they're going through it, and like nothing that I'd be like, oh, that's my favorite version of Lizard, that's my favorite
right.
version of Split, but they're there's nothing wrong with those versions. Like they're played incredibly well for a band who's got to be shot at this point, right? Like they got to be exhausted because the energy level at that llama at the drop was so high.
Yeah.
And they've played so much to this point, right? And then they blow through Sparkle, they blow through Susie.
Sure.
Fishman comes out again. Trey goes to the
Yeah.
drum set, right? Like, and and this really, it's one of my most favorite old covers that he does because it's just like
Yeah.
the sincerity, silliness, but like it's a good song. Like at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like
Absolutely.
Trey's like high falsetto backup. I heard on this one, especially it's probably because of the FM broadcast, like you could really hear him
Sure.
singing backup, and I'm like, he's taking that so earnestly. Like he's really
Yep.
like hitting that note, and like this isn't a joke to them with like the ba. I remember the ba on the cymbals. Like I remember
Yep.
seeing it. Um, so that was funny, and then it stopped being funny.
Right. Well,
Because like,
so
yeah,
that's I mean, that's a I wrote that the you got Split Open and Melt is again, not, you said it, not it's not a best ever version, but it's they're shredding,
hmm
they're tearing things open.
yeah. If
You
you've
got
heard the
Liz,
last two sets, you know what the split open and melt is gonna be, right?
right,
Like,
right. You got the Lizards is sort of just a little bit of a cool down, right? Everybody's catching their breath, and then you get a cup of coffee from these guys with Sparkle, Susie, Crackling Rosie. Everybody's waking up. It's been a long night. Um, Sparkle and Susie are high energy. You got Smoke on the Water tease at the end of Susie. You got Peaches and Regalia teases again throughout this whole segment. And even the Peaches drum tease from Trey at the end of Cracklin' Rosie.
Yeah.
And so that's it. You know, they've blown your mind. They let you catch your breath, give you a big old cup of coffee, and here comes
almost
history.
Undeservedly at this point, right? So
No,
I think that's
deserving.
this. Well, no, like that's what I want to get into. So what I was saying about he didn't deserve was probably wrong, poorly phrased, and really what I meant was that everything to this point had been really had to have met everyone's expectations, the band, the crowd, of what the night was supposed to be. But what they get now and what the band delivers, which is kind of funny because when you and I first started talking about this show, we locked in on it, and on Reddit somebody posted a meme about this version of this song.
Right.
For very good reason. You know, I think the only note I have about it is that it might be the perfect encapsulation of Phish of this era.
Sure.
Forget about the best version of Harry Hood. Like, if you were to say, like, here's what this band sounds like, and here's what they are.
Right. I agree with that.
It's chills. I mean, it's a chills version. Really, a chills worthy version of Hood, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will say this at the risk of being crucified, you know, before my I don't think that it is the best Harry Hood ever.
Okay.
I will and that's not to say in any way, shape, or form that there's anything wrong with it. I think what you just said hits the nail on the head. This sounds like Phish during this era. This is the if you had to take any jam from somewhere near the beginning of somewhere in the middle of 92 to somewhere, you know, to 3/5 of the way through 94, this Harry Hood is going to be in the top 3 or 4 jams to accurately give somebody, you know, who otherwise would have no idea, you know, exactly what this band is. That being said, it is a moving. I mean, I don't.
Maybe that's what it is. Like,
I don't agree that
right? Maybe it's like emotional Harry Hood.
You know,
because to your point, I think you're hitting on something here that I didn't verbalize, but I felt listening to it. Right? Was that you know, when, you know, whether it be creativity, well, it's getting late. Whether it be creative or being able to speak, but, you know, when you're past the point of exhaustion, where there's nothing in the way, you know, maybe when you're so emotional and you're exhausted and you just can't, you know, you're just uncontrolling of what's coming out of you. And that's what I felt like. I felt like they were giving that to the audience. Like, we're going to put the cherry on this Sunday.
You hit it. It's, you just hit it. And it's the same thing that Big Cypress. It's you know what I mean?
Yeah, with the Sunrise.
That you hear Trey did that interview. I think it was for the Alive Again podcast, where he talks about we wanted to do this thing where and then he stops and he says, you know, when you're like, you know, a kid and you go to a sleepover and you and your friends are up all night and you know, you've like the sun's coming up and you're still awake and you know you've experienced this thing that, like,
the giddy exhaustion of the experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly, we said it last you know, an entire set ago. This had been a long night and could have been considered a complete show on a normal night in another year. You know what I mean? But on New
2 nights
Year's Eve.
before when I saw him, it was a normal show. I'll tell you that.
Right,
Like,
you're right.
yeah.
On New Year's Eve in 1993, they're on stage not defending necessarily. I'll have to see if another word comes to mind,
Taking
but
the torch.
yeah, I mean they're back. They are exposing and standing by the recipe that they just made the gravy with all year. You know what I mean? We did that, and here, this is what we're gonna keep doing, and we're gonna keep growing it. And it's like,
Here's
right.
something I just thought of, right? Like, just because we're getting tired too, right? We'll throw this out there,
Yeah,
but like,
man.
and just because I'm thinking of the time period and where both of these bands were at the time, but like, I said pass the torch,
Right.
but I mean, there's probably a better date to pick for when that happened, right? When they became the better show.
Right.
Right, like on a night to night basis, they were bringing a better product
Yeah,
than the Dead were at this time period, right?
I would
I'm
agree
sure
with
people
that.
will argue that, but I'm going to say that. But I think, in this song and this style of play and this energy of the whole night being put up onto this song, right? Like, as someone who was seeing both bands at the time, like, it
Hmm.
really, and now talking to you in this moment, talking about the show, re-listening to it again 30 years later, um, it really could be seen as that kind of seminal moment,
Yeah,
right? Because the
yeah.
Dead have
It's
2 years left, right? They're
right,
there. And it was a messy 2 years. This isn't even a good 2 years to have left. While
right,
this band is
right,
drinking rocket fuel on the way up.
right.
So,
It's a, it's
yeah,
a
this hood is, you and I will have our opinions, but I think the court of
right.
public opinion has already been set on it, right? So,
Absolutely.
and I don't think that's
I've
necessarily a bad thing either. People
sure.
being passionate about a version of a '93 song, in my opinion, as someone who got in the band in '93, and it's 2023.
Yeah,
That's great. I mean, so this
yeah.
band's doing some stupid, really cool shit. If that's the case, um,
I
they
just want to,
yeah.
I do want to to come back here and just say, while the words, this is not, I don't agree that it's the greatest episode,
Mhm.
the greatest version ever. That's not, I mean, it's not to say that I have another one that I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
is.
You're
It's
not going
more
to
of the
defend it
thing,
with another.
right, a thing that again, back to Reed touched on in that episode I listened to the other day, where he talked about how could I ever hear all of the fill in the blank? I forget what song you were talking about. When I think you asked him, "Is that the best ever, or is this your favorite?" And he said, "I could never know that. How could I hear them all?" And I was listening to that. I'm going, "You can hear them all, man. You have so
Yeah.
much time to listen to." But that's more of what it is for me. I think I know. You know, I know that there are a lot of Harry Hood Stones for me that have yet to
Isn't there
be
one on live one? Isn't there a
turned.
really good version on a live one or no?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I don't. Well, I'd have to check that, because
yeah.
that brings up something actually. A lot of, I feel like there's two camps of people when you got a live one and you got Hampton Comes Alive, right? I Hampton Comes Alive had just been released, I believe, when I was starting to get into these guys, and I never owned a live one. I
Mm.
listened to Hampton Comes Alive when I was going through my, okay, this band is now gonna consume, my every ounce of minute of free time for the rest of my life. I listened to those 6 discs of Hampton Comes Alive for months and months on end. But there's a there's an amazing one on that, but so that's all it is. It's not in any way, shape, or form, uh, to knock this hood in any way, because you know, that's not accurate, and it's not to say that it is not the greatest. It's just to say,
Hey,
I don't
listen,
know. but it's
that's
there.
an
You know what I
opinion,
mean?
right? Like exactly,
Right,
exactly.
right,
And
right,
like that emotion of the moment that we spoke about from the very beginning of this podcast,
right,
right? Of
right.
the emotion of the band and getting into the band, but also, you know, what it was like to have just gone through that journey live with them through these two,
Absolutely.
3 sets, right?
Right. They're they're exhibiting
Good.
their passion. They're exhibiting their
Yeah,
passion
and
for what they
openly to
do.
a receptive audience, which
Right. And they're,
is
you
that.
know, they're saying we're not, any other band might send you home right now, but
Yeah.
we're not. And not only are we not sending you home, we're gonna do what we love to do. And I think that's the period on the sentence right there, you know. They're
Hell, man,
they're
most
they're up
bands send you
there.
home before Old Lang Syne. Yeah,
They're
before
up
the
there
ball even
doing what
comes down. Yeah.
they're up there doing what they love to do. That's
Well, and then they close it out with, you know, the best 3 minutes in rock and roll.
I
Tweezer
wrote that
reprise.
down. You said that I think in your first episode, and I wrote it down. I didn't realize it'd be a recurring theme, you know. Um
When they play it, I'll say it.
yeah, that's what I mean. I thought I'll tell you, I thought that first time you said it, I thought I made note. I'm like, I thought you were saying that version of Tweezer Reprise was
No,
the
Tweezer
best.
reprise. Period.
When I
Period. Full
heard you
stop.
say it again, it dawned on me. I'm like, I see what's up here. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
there's no,
and you're not wrong.
no, and you know, credits due. The guy who
Yeah,
gave me that knows who said it, but like
right,
I really believe, you know, it's just it gets you every time. Like it hits every time. It's amazing.
right.
So
I
so not only do they close with that hood, then they give him the best 3 minutes of rock and roll to like have that feeling to close out the night, right?
yeah,
And then, you know, the encore is something interesting because they come out with Golgi, right? And I think that's
yeah,
like back to the theme of that core audience of their that fan base at the time and who's seen them on New Year's
absolutely.
Night 3. Like they love that. Like that's a song that they're seeking. They want to see that when they play. So you can kind of hear it, they go through it. But what's interesting to me in this encore was the Amazing Grace, right?
Yeah,
Because not only because of like how infrequently it's played,
right,
it's pretty incredible that it was like it's a great time to do it on an FM broadcast in a big arena like that, right? So you
right.
know you can get a good recording of it. But
Yes.
the thing that I found most interesting, and I went back and listened to it again right before you and I started tonight, was that for a song traditionally throughout my life that I found sad and morbid.
Hmm.
Um, this is a mic drop, triumphant, Amazing Grace.
Right.
Like this is like a swinging dick moment for them. You can hear it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can hear it. Like when they hit the 10,000 years line, right? Like
Yep.
it's not a. I don't know why it's always been that way in my head. Probably because most versions are kind of sullen.
Wow. Yeah,
But
man.
this one is anything but that. It is the most celebratory, Amazing Grace, probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like an Emmylou Harris version or like Dolly, like some version I haven't heard from some like Lucinda Williams or something like somebody's got some crazy version I haven't heard. But like
Right.
to me, this was really one of the first times I've ever heard this song in my life. It was like, this is a mic drop.
Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we could sing too, you know.
Yeah, but I
And
think there was something about the song too, the lyrics in the song at the time. You know, I never look at it the way I did when they're singing it. It was like there was something spiritual,
yeah,
right, about them, this experience for them on this night,
yeah, no doubt
and
about that.
uh, they definitely let it be known, right? Because like even they're laughing at the end, and like they
Yeah.
just knew
I mean,
they crushed it.
if you choose to explore the idea that's come up a couple times about shedding skin, moving on,
Mm.
growing out of Amazing Grace is a song that's I would imagine. I mean, do they sing that at funerals or like,
I
like
feel like it's like an
when you're talking about like
appropriate.
morbid? Yeah, I feel like it's very. I mean, so it's like, is the band aware of like, what is happening? That's what I'm getting at. It's like we can look back with hindsight. We can see like, okay, you know, they were growing. They're heading into this major this phase. These next handful of, you know, is this closing the, you know, the casket, so to speak,
Mhm.
on the early years, on the formative, you know what I mean? It's really pretty fascinating, you know. uh, dude, something that keeps coming back, and it's happening right now. It keeps bringing me back. It's happening right now, right? I get these glimpses uh into the troll, you know what I mean? To have them, exactly what you're talking about, this big, like, you know, it's been the big inside joke from the start, you know what I mean? To have them up there, ending this show with Amazing Grace, like you're saying, you know, for the reasons we've outlined, or whatever, and then to hear him laughing and having, and it's like, th- this is all a big joke in the most, like, serious way possible, you know what I mean?
The way that the seriousness of life is, right? Like, and I
Right,
think,
right.
what's interesting with that mindset is the fact of that everyone who gets to this point, and this came up in the when I was talking to Powell about the show in '92, is that unlike other fan bases, they don't have to show up and perform a thing, right? So the thing is always whatever they want to be at that time,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
99.9% of the people are cool with it.
Yep,
A tenth of the people complain online about it,
yep,
right? And then everyone all of a sudden 3 years later is like, I love that song,
yep.
right? Because change is hard, but it's also the only inevitability of life.
Absolutely.
So the fact is that when people go 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, dude, it's all Phish. It's all Phish, right? Just be lucky. Like, it's lucky that we have a band that's healthy, that's
Yep,
here now, about to celebrate New Year's Eve on 2023
yep.
at the most hallowed arena in America, in my opinion, Madison Square
Yeah,
Garden. But he,
absolutely.
from this band who, to your point, right, just played acoustic, pardon me, acapella, Amazing Grace, right? Like, there's literally nothing stopping them from starting the next show with an acapella Amazing Grace and picking up right where they left off in '93.
You got that right.
And just as a little, I don't know if you saw, there was a schematic. The stage is set up a little bit differently at MSG, so I don't know what that means. There's a
I did. I saw the picture floating around the interwebs.
yeah. So
I'm all for it, man. I know, you know, uh, circling back around to the when I answered that the technology. I don't miss a show still with the with the
sure,
webcasts.
yeah,
I can't. I'm so invested in this at this point. You know, I do what we did tonight. I put my, you know, I feed my sons and I put them to bed, and I, you know, I take care of this home with my partner, and then I say goodnight, and this is, I go down to the basement and flip it on, and this is, I can't do it, man. You mentioned FOMO, and like, if I'm not there, and I can still see it in real time, I haven't I haven't missed a show since I start, you know, on that.
yeah. And I think there's something to that as far as, for a very juvenile, poor analogy, right? It's almost like when you join the Cub Scouts or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, and you're gonna collect all the merit badges, right?
Right,
I'm gonna get
right.
them all. I'm gonna get them all. The
Um,
only problem here is that the Help You Friendly book keeps getting bigger
yeah,
every year, and that's where the
right.
lucky part comes back, right? That you're gonna be able to put your kids to bed, and I'm older than you, and you're older than Reed, and I might not make it to midnight. Right. So the fact is that I could watch it the next morning and still, live vicariously through those folks who, put that energy in at the
Yeah.
garden with them. So, this was a really great conversation about a really
Oh
cool
man.
show
Yeah.
with a guy in the state where it happened. So thank you so much for that, Derek. That was really cool.
Oh
So
man, my
every person
pleasure.
who comes on, that's a two-way street, man. So everybody who comes on, I ask them to recommend a show to me post 2011, and that's just an arbitrary date that I put out there based on my
Right.
own merits. So what show would you recommend to me?
Well, it came down to the wire, man, because that's a lot of responsibility. I'm just kidding. Uh July 24th, 2022, in Hartford.
My old stomping ground.
This Yeah, Hartford. I've seen some bangers in
Me
Hartford, and
too.
it's
Early
like,
2000 Hartford's. Woo!
yeah, and it's the next. It's outside of Great Woods. It's the next closest venue to where I grew up, and where I live now. It's like 59 minutes down 91.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's where I head for now. So this show, if you're into the exploration, if you're into the improvisation, and I something tells me that you most certainly are, you're gonna love it. This show got a lot of, that 1% or whatever of the people that talk
Tenth
shit,
of a
you might
percent.
feel
I
out
only
of
had a tenth of a percent, man. I
tenth
think
of
it's
a
such a
percent.
small. It's so small.
And
That's the problem.
they
They're just loud.
those those people loved this show. I was at this show, and I walked out of that place feeling that shell shock that I did in Manchester a decade ago.
Mm.
Decade ago, it was one of the best shows I've ever seen, and the web lit up that night with with shots fired from that crew. So I hope you enjoy that show. I actually really can't wait to hear what you think of it.
That's cool
Very
because
in,
I definitely
yeah,
haven't listened to it. I was out of Connecticut at that point, so I haven't seen a show there in a couple of years. So very excited to
excellent,
listen to that because I
excellent.
know there's some, being the home state of my first show, and I've seen some really. Connecticut is a very special state for that band for a couple
Yeah,
different reasons, but like they've always brought the wood uh to whether it be New Haven Coliseum, which doesn't exist anymore, the Hartford
right.
Civic Center under the mall, or
Yep.
Not Great Woods, pardon me, the Meadows, which it's not called the
Meadows.
Meadows
Yep.
anymore. But
Right.
I
They
look forward to that.
yeah, you're gonna love it, man.
Cool. I look forward. I'm gonna let you know what I think before I cut the next show. I'll give a little review of
Absolutely.
it. But this has been an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate it. I know it
Yeah.
spent a lot of your time to listen and to participate. And so I'll send you the merit badge that you can now put on your sash, and
Absolutely.
you could do that and know you
Thank
checked this
you.
one off. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. This has been a fantastic
Weinstein
conversation.
Weinstein put words to, I don't know if they're his words or if he heard them from someone else, but he says we're completists. Phish fans, we're completists. You have to check it off the list and all. And when you just mentioned the merit badges, that's all I could think of. Weinstein said it. I am a completist when it comes to this, and I'm gonna keep. The list keeps growing. I'm gonna keep chasing it, man.
That's the best part. I think that's the best part. We're never, as long as they're there, we're going to be there in lockstep with them. And whether it's being
Absolutely.
able to see them technology wise or being lucky enough to get out with a large group of people who feel the same way we
Absolutely.
do and be shoulder to
Yes.
shoulder is the best experience we can get. So thanks
Thank
again,
you,
Derek. This was
Bill.
amazing. I really appreciate it this time. I know it took a lot, so thanks again. And we'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon, and we'll see each other somewhere at some place.
Yes, sir. Take care,
Thank you,
Bill.
man.
Thank you
Nice
very
meeting
much.
you. Thanks,
You
Eric.
too.
Bye-bye.
Sucks from my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.
Thanks for listening. If you're an older fan who'd like to recommend a show from 1988 to 1996, or a new fan would like to be part of an upcoming episode, email the show at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Thoughts remain my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.